He has always seemed like the kind of star the camera doesn't just capture, it trusts. George Clooney walks into a frame and the atmosphere steadies. The smile knows something, the eyes have lived through something, and the scene calibrates around that calm. From a breakthrough that made Thursday nights feel electric to a run of films that married old Hollywood grace with modern irony, he became a shorthand for poise, wit, and unshakable craft. But look closely, and you'll see it. The shadow that trails behind the light, the tender places where charm is not a shield, but a promise to keep going. Before we begin, if his work has ever moved you, leave a like as a small tribute before we start. At 63, a deeper darkness began to hover around the story people tell about him. Not because a single event defined him, his life is far too layered for one neat headline, but because time, responsibility, and the bruising cost of visibility gathered in ways both public and quiet. He has reportedly lived with pain that doesn't always announce itself, yet never quite goes away. He has seen careers rescued and careers crushed, sometimes in the same season. He has watched the world's ugliness up close while trying to answer it with mercy, and he has done so while building a late-in-life family that reframed every risk and every choice. What happens when a man famous for steadiness realizes that the ground beneath him is not as steady as it once seemed? What happens when the smile that reassures an audience must also reassure two small children who call him Dad? The tragedy here is not a lurid twist. It is the haunting arithmetic of time, responsibility, and scars, physical, emotional, and historical, accumulated by a man who dared to care about more than his own close-up. He was not born into a palace, at least not the kind with marble floors. The rooms of his childhood were lit by the kind of lamps that hum in the evening and cast a pool of warmth over a kitchen table. The Ohio River country carries a particular smell in summer: wet earth, cut grass, a little gasoline from the small engines that keep rural life moving. And if you grew up there, you remember it forever. His father, a local broadcast presence, reportedly carried into their home the crackle of newsrooms, coffee gone cold on stacked scripts, the grease pencil marks that say, "Make this clearer," the ethic that says your name is only as good as your last piece of work. His mother, poised and thoughtful, made space for something gentler: books, conversation, the quiet conviction that talent is a thing you cultivate, not a costume you wear. The house was not large, but it had long hallways of laughter and an archive of little rituals: a chair by a window, a plate of cut fruit, a song played on repeat because someone in the family could not let go of a mood. If you're picturing a boy constantly performing, you'd be wrong. He learned early the discipline of watching. There were times when silence shaped him more than applause could. In adolescence, when a sudden neurological condition briefly unveiled the fragility behind every teenage face, he learned something no classroom teaches. Your body can betray you, and you must still carry yourself through the day. That kind of experience etches itself into memory. It makes you tender toward certain struggles. It also teaches a private bravery, a quiet that doesn't boast, but doesn't quit. Long before he became the man whose tuxedo fit like a sentence with no wasted words, he was a kid hauling tobacco in the heat and running errands that paid in cash and credibility. The early job list reads like a map of humility: odd shifts, retail counters, helping hands, whatever taught him to keep his posture and his humor when comfort wasn't guaranteed. There were hand-me-down cars that coughed more than they purred. There were apartments with thin walls where ambition kept you up at night anyway. There were rooms where every no sounded like an indictment, and there were mornings when the only way forward was simply to get up. The entertainment world is famous for pretending it sees everyone. What it really notices is momentum. Those years offered little. He appeared in rooms that seemed designed to misunderstand him. Too handsome for the serious part, too serious for the pretty boy slot, too grounded for the caricature. He kept going. An aunt's living room, a friend's spare couch, the kindness of someone who believed he might make it. These were the bridges he crossed. Auditions blur together until one day they don't. An underwritten role in a sitcom, a recurring face on a set that felt like a summer job stretched into infinity. He took each small part and tried to carve a human out of it, a shrug that meant more, a line landing with a beat of truth, an eye roll that, if you watched closely, contained fatigue and faith in equal measure. By most accounts, he showed up early, stayed late, and listened. He was invisible in a world obsessed with spotlights, and that invisibility taught him to master the things no spotlight can fix: rhythm, timing, generosity. The crack in the wall came, as it often does, when craft met chance. A medical drama with an ensemble sharper than most, a role that fused competence and rebellious tenderness, and a nation made oddly hopeful by the idea that a doctor could race down a hallway and choose mercy at speed. He played it like a man who believed he could lose something every time he won an argument. Television can be disposable. This era wasn't. Thursday night became a ritual, and the character he built, capable yet wounded, charming yet accountable, felt like a grown-up version of the kid who had learned to carry his own storms quietly. And that's when everything changed. Suddenly, the camera's trust became the world's trust. Suddenly, the near misses of a decade felt like prelude, not failure. Every phone call mattered. Every lunch was a meeting. There are lunches that change your life. He took them with a calm that suggested he already knew who he was. Stardom either inflates you or focuses you. He chose focus. The summit came quickly, then slowly, then all at once. An ocean of friends, robberies staged like jazz riffs, a runaway hit that revived the heist film without breaking a sweat. He walked like Sinatra sounded, swing without swagger, mischief with a moral center. He took risks that signaled ambition, not vanity, period satire that let him be ridiculous and precise at the same time, a brutal piece on geopolitics that required him to get messy, to leave beauty at the door. He directed with the patience of someone who knows actors are not instruments, but partners. He wrote with the humility of a student and the stubbornness of a man who refuses to let cynicism be the last word. Awards arrived because work arrived. Recognition came because he kept putting his shoulder against the hardest parts of storytelling: complexity, nuance, the kind of endings that feel earned. If you measure a career by how many people it emboldened to try harder, the number is astonishing. When a new generation of artists needed proof that intelligence could be bankable, he became the billboard. When people sneered at the idea that political awareness and star power could live in the same conversation, he declined to sneer back. He simply kept showing up. But the high sun casts the sharpest shadows. Behind the images, carpets, microphones, that lopsided grin, were private costs that did not make headlines until they bled into the work. On one film, an injury to the spine reportedly altered his sense of gravity and relief. A pain you can't quite point to is a pain that crowds everything. Headaches arrived like storms. Sleep, mercy's first ally, didn't always come when called. Later, on a road that looks romantic in postcards and murderous in reality, a motorcycle met a physics problem and the human body lost. He walked away, thank God, but the mind keeps replaying moments that almost end you. This is not gossip. It's the arithmetic of flesh and metal. Meanwhile, family losses pulled at the threads of his composure. A legendary aunt, whose voice tutored America in longing and joy, left the stage for good. A cousin whose talent felt like an inheritance was suddenly gone. Grief is strange. It may not ask for tears, but it always asks for a rearrangement of meaning. By most accounts, he rearranged quietly, channeling sorrow into a kind of steadiness that others could lean on. Career peaks never exempt anyone from loneliness. You can have 100 people around you and still feel the distance between your body and your soul. There were relationships that ended not in scandal, but in the sad math of two people wanting different futures. There were seasons when the eternal bachelor joke was just that, a joke that hid a gentler truth. He hadn't found the home he needed yet. There were philanthropic battles fought against dictatorship, atrocity, and impunity that left him with images he couldn't unsee. To care at scale is to invite heartbreak at scale. He did it anyway. But here's where it gets complicated. The man the public wants, our reliable gentleman rogue, the tuxedo that never wrinkles, the easy laugh that redeems a press line, coexists with the citizen who knows how hard the world is. The brand works because the person behind it refuses to use it as a disguise. The smile is real, and so are the nights when anxiety walks the house at 2 in the morning and checks the locks. Fame offers you insulation and then asks you to pay for it in isolation. He learned to distinguish success from safety. He understood that a philanthropic headline feels good the day it runs and then yields to the long, unglamorous work of building institutions that actually protect the vulnerable. He helped found one of those institutions not to collect applause, but to track the places where applause dies, courtrooms where justice lives or doesn't, regions where warlords wager with human lives as though they were chips, villages where accountability feels like a rumor. Doing that work while holding a career together requires a stamina most people never need. Add to it the tenderness of late fatherhood, and the calculation changes. Risk is no longer just yours to take. Every choice asks a new question. Who am I to these two small people who believe I can fix everything? The complication is not scandal, it's depth. It's the friction between the man who was once available to the whole world and the father who knows his most sacred audience lives down the hall. Now, if you're wondering, does the industry still make room for grown man gravitas in a marketplace that worships the young? Do activists with famous faces do more harm or more good? Did selling a business mean selling out, or was it a strategic liberation of time and attention? The answers require measuring rumor against record. By most accounts, he has used wealth as a tool rather than a trophy, underwriting projects that might otherwise have gone unmade, lifting crews when budgets were tight, and seeding a foundation that watches trials and documents abuses where cameras rarely go. Sources close to the charitable work say he is not a drop-in donor. He is a planner with an appetite for the unglamorous. As for the myth of the permanent bachelor, it belongs to a past the tabloids preferred, not to the life he eventually chose. When love found him, it did so with a partner whose resume could humble most heads of state. It's been said that the meeting was almost accidental, one of those evenings that turns ordinary only in hindsight because destiny rarely announces itself. What is public record is simple. Their courtship resisted spectacle, their wedding looked like a rebuke to cynicism, and their shared project, using law and attention to protect the powerless, became a through line more durable than box office. The business deal that made headlines years ago appears, in retrospect, to have been a pivot, away from hustle for its own sake and toward curation, fatherhood, and choosing fewer, better battles. If you're keeping score, the ledger of myth versus documentation lands here. He is less a charming anecdote than a working theory about how to be useful while visible. Love, when it arrived, reframed his posture. Partners can become mirrors or compasses. He found both. She brought to his life a discipline and an audacity that matched his own. Briefs instead of scripts, courtrooms instead of camera setups, and a moral vocabulary so clear it cuts through noise like a bell. Their home reportedly balances the practical and the exquisite. Children's voices ricocheting off bookshelves, meal plans that make room for the unpredictable, schedules that look like complicated math problems solved with tenderness. Friends, some famous, some not, rotate through like a chorus, steadying the days when work expands to fill every corner. He has collaborators who know him as a boss who hates unnecessary drama and worships punctuality. He has castmates who would follow him anywhere because he makes sets feel safe. He has neighbors who, by most accounts, know that privacy is a courtesy, not a contract, and treat it as such. And then there are the twins, the daily reminder that legacy is another word for bedtime stories told in the correct voice, for showing up with the joke that works, for holding tiny hands when thunderstorms rearrange the sky. If you've ever watched him on a red carpet and thought he looks lighter, maybe that's why. Found family isn't a consolation prize, it's a calling. The present battle is not a headline, it is a calendar. It is the negotiation between ache and purpose every morning, the audit of energy that decides whether today belongs to a new script, a day of advocacy, or simply a soccer practice that should not be missed. He is a man in his 7th decade who still believes in making things. He directs because it lets him build a world from the ground up. He acts because sometimes a story needs his particular gravity. He shows up at fundraisers and briefings because he has seen the long arc of justice and knows it does not bend without pressure. There are old injuries that reportedly still whisper when the weather changes. There are mornings when the aches ask for patience. There are days when he wonders how to scale himself so that the work gets done and the children get not just the best of him, but the ordinary of him. The dad who burns pancakes and then laughs, the man who might skip a gala because a school concert is the better room. Is it possible to be the person a world believes you are and the person two small people need you to be, all while the clock refuses to slow? He tries to answer that question by making a life that is as intentional as his. Performances. He chooses projects as if they were family friends. Do they bring out the good? Do they teach the kids something? Do they help us carry the world with a little more grace? Recent years have seen him return to directing stories that prefer decency to spectacle, resilience to noise. He collaborates with old friends because trust is an economy no one can afford to squander. And when he steps back from certain kinds of exposure, it is not retreat. It is the strategy of a man who understands that mystery can be a kind of mercy, for himself, for his family, for the work. If you trace the arc from the kid in the river towns to the man stewarding a foundation with his partner, you see a pattern, resilience braided with responsibility. The tragedy, if we can use that word with care, resides not in one catastrophic event, but in the haunting knowledge that even a blessed life carries bruises no one can see. The accident that might have ended him becomes, in retrospect, a whispered warning to recalibrate. The long-standing injury that lingers after the director shouts, "Cut," becomes a second director, telling him when to slow down. The public's need to be comforted by the idea of a flawless gentleman becomes for him a reminder to protect his private self fiercely. He is not interested in perfect, he is interested in true. He reminds you that charm, at its best, is not a performance, but a commitment to making rooms kinder than he found them. In this, he has been consistent for decades. He remembers crew birthdays. He tips like a man who remembers counting tips. He writes notes when a friend's parent dies. He shows up, without cameras, when a colleague's cause needs a nudge. According to those who have been on his sets, he doesn't confuse leadership with volume. He listens. He course corrects. He carries his scars as signals, not souvenirs. And yet, the part of his story that breaks your heart is simply time. The roles get rarer for everyone who refuses to pretend adolescence can last forever. The body files its reports more often. He once joked about being an old man. Now he treats the subject like a craft project, how to age without surrendering curiosity. He reads more. He travels in ways that prioritize substance over spectacle. He chooses a dinner table full of people who argue in good faith and laugh like siblings. He is not finished. He is refining. The children grow. The foundation expands its reach, watching trials where the stakes are not abstract but immediate. There are seasons when the world's cruelty makes their work feel like a finger in a leaking dam. There are wins that seem small and are actually enormous to the people who can finally name their abusers in open court. The man who once made the case for cool now makes the case for conscience. That may be the most radical third act Hollywood has to offer. He knows, better than most, that history is a scrapbook people build out of what they loved and what they survived. His scrapbook is heavy with both. It contains teenage photographs where a medical scare didn't stop him from meeting the gaze of the camera. It contains pay stubs from jobs that many would snicker at, and he refuses to. It contains call sheets from shows that stitched themselves into the fabric of American nights. It contains production notes from films that dared to suggest smart is sexy. It contains hospital discharge papers that remind him to wear humility like a second skin. It contains wedding vows that restructured his orbit. It contains crayon art, a framed courtroom sketch, a leather-bound notebook with a list of projects that will only get made if he keeps saying, quietly and persistently, "Let's do it right." He isn't naive about the trade he chose. Hollywood can take the brightest intentions and fray them. It can take a private sorrow and monetize it. He guards against that by keeping his center anchored where cameras cannot follow. There are dinners you will never see, prayers you will never hear, and promises made that only a handful of people are entitled to hold him to. He has learned to say no as a form of respect, to himself, to the audience, to the collaborators who deserve his best. He still says yes often enough to remind us that the thing we loved about him was never just the jawline, it was the decency. It was the way he could deliver a line that hinted at a wound and a joke and a plan all at once. It was the way he stood next to people on screen, never in front of them, and made them better. Perhaps the most heartbreaking truth of all is that even a life performed at this level cannot protect any of us from the daily work of being human. He knows this, and you can see it in the way he holds his family close during ordinary errands. You can see it in the way he speaks about the world beyond his gates, as if distance were something a person chooses, not something imposed. You can see it in the way he navigates regret. There is a film he has apologized for more times than he needed to. He did so because he understands that leadership admits mistakes without turning them into comedy. There are roles he passed on and roles he took that he might reorder if time allowed. But regret in his hands is not a wall, it's a window. He looks through it and finds new ways to try again. When he directs now, the camera lingers not on spectacle but on consequence. When he acts, he amplifies other people's silence. When he uses his name, it's to open a door he intends to hold for a long time. He will always be the man who made a generation feel that intelligence and kindness could be cool. He will also be the man who, reportedly coming home from physical therapy or an advocacy meeting, stops to buy groceries like the rest of us because dinner will not make itself and the kids like their pasta a certain way. He has learned to savor small weather, the way light slants through a kitchen at 5 p.m., the chorus of a favorite song sung badly by happy children, the truce that settles over a house when everyone finally sleeps. In those moments, the legend steps back and the person steps forward. That's not a loss. That's the prize. So, yes, the tragedy is beyond heartbreaking if by tragedy we mean the knowledge that a finite life, no matter how generous, no matter how brilliant, must carry its share of scars and leave some work undone. But pay attention to where he points the camera now. Pay attention to the stories he tries to lift and the people he chooses to stand beside. Pay attention to how gently he talks about failure, how swiftly he gives credit away, how stubbornly he believes in the kind of justice that is not a headline but a habit. That is a legacy built not just on applause but on mercy. He is still here. He is still making. He is still finding ways to hold light in one hand and carry the storm in the other. The kid from River Country became the man the camera trusts because he kept a promise to himself, to be useful. If you have a favorite moment, an emergency room hallway charged with hope, a slick heist reimagined as friendship, a quiet scene where grief sits down and tells the truth, carry it with you. Carry it the way he carries his family, his work, and the people whose names will never be on a marquee, but who sleep safer because of something his life set in motion. And if you have a memory of how his work steadied you on a hard day, share it below with kindness. Leave a like as a gesture of support, not for the legend alone, but for the man still learning, with all of us, how to turn scars into stories and stories into shelter.